technical business meeting, proudly sponsored by Hager Geosolutions and Shearwater. As part of So I'll just run through the agenda for today, and then I'll call up our president-elect to do the next steps. Okay, so it's going to be a packed session, as usual. The first on the agenda is, of course, registration, networking, and arrival of our guests. I'm giving you the welcome note now. PE will come up to recognize our dignitaries, speakers, chairmen, past presidents, and fellows present here. This will be followed by remarks from our president, Mr. John Bosco Uche. And then the chairman will be introduced by the president-elect. This would then be followed by, so the chairman will then come in and introduce the speaker, with Mr. Edward from Shearwater. So more details will come with that. Then there will be introduction of the panelists by the president-elect. Afterwards, we will then have a panel review session. It will be closely followed by Q&A session. After that, we would have a special recognition moment for our Petra instructors and the NAPE YP executives. That will be done by President-elect. And then I'll come up for announcements. Votes of thanks will then be taken by the President-elect, and then we will go for lunch. Thank you. That will be the end of the day. Thank you. PE, please come up.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning to those online. Thank you for joining our technical meeting of March 2025. We had one last month, February, and this is the second technical meeting we're having in Lagos in this year, 2025. And I want to especially thank our sponsors of today. If they had not sponsored the event, we wouldn't be sitting here today. So let's all thank them let's give them a round of applause for sponsoring the event. And the companies are Shearwater and Harvest Geosolutions. We appreciate you all. We thank all our fellows who are here with us today, those online and those who are physically here. We have Mr. Nedo Osonyade FNAPE. We have Mr. Oshobu Godwin FNAPE. We have our immediate past president, Dr. Abiodun Ogunjobi FNAPE. Thank you for coming. We have our president, John Bosco Uche FNAPE. Thank you for coming for today's meeting. And online, we have Mr. Alex Taka, FNAPE. Thank you for joining us. We have Mr. Wole Shebioba, FNAPE. We just have our past president here, Mr. Jibola, FNAPE. You're welcome. Thank you very much. And I don't want to take too much of your time. This is already 11:35, and we have a lot to learn here today. But in all, I just want to say thank you on behalf of our ESCO and all NAPE members for joining today's technical session. So at this point, I will call on our president to come give us his opening remark. Thank you.
Thank you very much, our President-elect, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I want to, again, join my voice, but I also want to now formally welcome you as a remark to this technical and business meeting that we typically hold here every month. We kicked off this in February, and then this is the second series. And I'm quite, looking at the attendance as well today, and I believe online as well, you haven't really disappointed. But again, it shows the impact that NAPE continues to play in this industry in terms of topical issues. And in this time around, it's going to be around seismic. And I'm quite happy that Shearwater and Harvest Geosolutions has consistently actually supported NAPE year in after year, back to back. So thank you very much for what you've been doing. Each time I see Hager or Michael or Peter, it looks like anyway. Peter, maybe I know Peter is an active member of NAPE, but Hager and Michael, I think you need to now register, officially to join NAPE because you've really earned it to become a member of NAPE. And if you look at the topic, we couldn't have anyone better than our own Nedo Osanyande, who, the topic we're going to discuss today is something he eats and, breathe and talk about. So I'm sure we will get the right direction. So thank you so much, Nedo FNAPE, for, again, accepting to help us chair the session today. And for every one of you, I know the President-elect have already recognized the fellows. Our commitment as ESCO is to continue to deliver program that not just satisfy what you're looking for, but to have big impact in this country, because this is our country. We have to continue to do the right thing, to continue to find oil and gas in the right way, wherever they hide. And I think today, with the right technology, we should be able to go find them wherever they're hiding. So on that note, on behalf of the Executive Committee, the Advisory Council, and the Board of Trustees, I really want to welcome you formally to March NAPE Technical and Business Technical Meeting that we typically have here. And please relax and enjoy the remaining part of this morning and into the afternoon. Thank you very much.
The next thing on our agenda is the introduction of our chairman for today's program. One thing we do is, in order to, ensure that knowledge is well passed and gathered from our technical meetings, to get a subject matter expert to be the chairman for the technical meeting. And for today's topic, we believe that our chairman of today will do justice to that after the presenter must have presented, because he's a subject matter expert. And I will read his bio, a very short one. Mr. Nedo Osanyande is the chairman of Belema Oil Producing Limited, an independent exploration and production company operating in the Niger Delta region of Nigeria. Nedo retired from Shell Nigeria in year 2015, where he held various positions, including Head Seismic Acquisition West, Head Geophysics Western Region, Head Research and Development and Geosolutions Manager, and he was also General Manager Sustainable Development. From the bio I've just read, we all agree with me that Mr. Nedo Osanyande is the ideal person to share this technical meeting. So join me in welcoming him to the stage. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Good morning, everyone. First, please note that that photograph of mine that was shown was taken about 25 years ago. When I saw the flyer, I had to go for a haircut so that you don't think it's an impostor that's here. I'm not going to read before I read the bio of the gentleman who will give the talk, let me just make some short remark first. Following COP26, about 2 or 3 years ago, there was a huge stampede of oil companies trying to get away from the oil business. But since then, better reasoning has now prevailed to recognize that the world needs energy, and we are not going to run away from oil and gas pretty soon. So some universities that discontinued teaching geophysics are beginning to re-enroll students for geophysics. In Nigeria, most of what we have now, where we are producing from, were discovered long ago with relatively short cables. Now that we are going to have increased need for more and more hydrocarbon, even so especially gas, we need to go more for longer cables to reach deeper. In reaching deeper, you also have to listen longer. And to go deeper, you also need some higher component of longer wavelengths, because high frequencies attenuate really fast. So when I saw that this speaker is going to be talking about long offsets and low frequencies, that really will be nice for us to have in Nigeria. It fits with the direction we need to go to. So now let me read the bio. Mr. Hager started working with Western Geophysical in 1991 as an onboard field QC, passing through geophysical support, data processing, and survey design departments for Western Geophysical, becoming survey design regional manager, Middle East and Africa. In 2014, he joined Polacus as the area geophysicist for the Asia-Pacific region based in Singapore. In 2021, Ed was appointed Chief Geophysicist Acquisition for Shearwater. Please join me in welcoming him to the stage to give his talk. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here again. Thank you, Mr. President, Madam President-elect and Chairman, for those wonderful introduction. So today I'm going to be talking about modern survey design. Understand the context of what I'm future. Maybe it'll, is it? There we go. Just go that, as I said, into the first major advanced broadband seismics. The official vessels became bigger and had higher capacity. And then finally, where we're at now, which is all about long offsets and low frequencies, and the importance of those, and how we might look at those so in historic survey design, I've called this fighting the ghost, and we adapted our actions by just accepting the fact that there wasn't much we could do about it. And the ghost problem is and it's The ghost is when you have an additional reflection from the sea surface that's received just after the primary reflection. And this happens on the the receiver side and on the source side. And these ghosts constructively destruct this into spectrum. And here we have a broadband, flat amp, and this is the effect of having a source and receiver ghost for simple side, and we did back then, of a peak and two side lines are cause problems with interpretation. And we might compute the Q factor, or the Earth's attenuation of high frequencies, which is a very important consideration. It's what we can expect realistically to get back from in reflected data. And these we might compute from a VSP if we were lucky, or estimate from the legacy data. So with a measure of the noise floor, the Q factor, velocities, we could then compute a 1D model that looked at optimizing new tow depths and source volumes, source and streamer tow depths. And this is because maybe the data we had was a legacy 2D data, was a big exploration survey, and now of course you're looking at a very small area, and now you'd want to tune that data to fit your actual exploration area. So you would want to change the tow depths and things like that, and potentially even source sizes. But in all cases, the tow depths were designed to keep the ghost notch higher than the maximum frequency. And then we could also compute sampling requirements based on the frequency content that would give you, and the velocities would give you bin sizes, trace spacing, migration apertures, and the like. And then we might compute the resolutions at the end to see if they meet the requirements of the expected characteristics of the reservoir, bed thickness, for example. So this is what that might look like. So here we have a simple analysis that you might do. You might guess your signal level, estimate the noise floor, work out some sort of amplitude difference. And this amplitude difference actually remains fairly constant. The noise we generate that this refers to is really from the source itself. So if you make the source bigger, that sort of number stays relatively constant. And then we might look at the frequency content of the data with bandpass filter panels, and we can see the decay with frequencies with time. And this part is, of course, very difficult to improve upon. And that will become more apparent in the broadband part of this. So we might have a velocity trend from the PSDM velocities, let's say, of the legacy survey. These were generally very low quality velocities and very inaccurate. So really we preferred in survey design to use a VSP if we had one. That would be the gold standard, I suppose, or at least a check shot, so we got a more accurate understanding of the subsurface velocities. Oops. And from this, we would compute the maximum offset. In this case, we've got two, the red and the green represent different targets, the primary target, maybe secondary target. And just by using the stretch mute, we would decide what offsets we might require. And typically, they would be relatively short, 2, 3 kilometers, 4 kilometers back in the day. Oops. And once we have that, we could then compute resolutions and see whether that would meet the requirements of the survey, or was it worth shooting the survey, or what the final results the geologists could expect to see, and how they might then, deal with it if they couldn't get exactly what they wanted. So survey design to maybe the early, maybe even to the mid-2010s. We had frequencies limited by the ghost response. We would tune the tow depths to maximize bandwidth. Streamers were generally just long enough to basically cover the primary targets, sometimes the secondary targets, plus a bit. So we'd always add a kilometer or two if we could. Dual sources to avoid overlap. But also at the time, the older recording systems could only record shot by shot. So the recording system would record the shot data for X many seconds, and then it would have to stop, reset, cycle, and then it could record the next shot. And the change of this is something that eventually enabled multi-source acquisition. But as time went on, the streamer capacity increased. The streamer counts maybe in the mid-90s going from 6 and rapidly rising to 12 by the mid-2000s, where nearly all vessels could tow at least 12 streamers. So broadband seismic was probably the first major change from conventional seismic, and started occurring around the mid-2000s when people started thinking of ways, well, actually before that in some ways, but becoming a commercial reality. And really, the reason for it is really quite straightforward. Here we see a standard seismic image, old school tow depths, and here's the broadband equivalent. And of course, we can see it's a much sharper, more easily interpretable section, a lot less ambiguity without the side lobes, for example. So you're not going to get more, the interpreters are not going to get quite so, would have to think less about what they're actually looking at. Essentially, then I have to think: is that a ghost? Is it a thin bed, and so on. So we can look a bit more closely at what we're trying to achieve. Then, so we can go back to this slide and look at where these come from. So these side lobes are about the loss of low frequencies, and the sharpness of the peak is relative to the high frequency content. And another way of looking at this. And this is probably a bit fuzzy, yeah. I couldn't find my version of this, so I took one from Malcolm Landley, who wrote a nice paper in the APG in 21. But the story is basically the same. We can have a look at a spectrum here and a range of frequencies and the resulting wavelet. So here we have a 2-octave spectrum, 12 to 48 hertz, and we have a pretty nasty wavelet. It's got very deep side lobes and pretty broad peak. In this one, we double the high frequencies, and we can see that we've actually sharpened the peak nicely, but we've had to go from 48 to 96 hertz. And many of you will realize that's an incredibly difficult number to achieve at target, to try and double that. But the side lobes are still pretty large, but they've sort of now got this high frequency ripple in them as well. Finally, in this one, the blue, we can see that we've kept the 48 hertz like the first one, but we've added a couple of octaves on the low frequency end. And we can see that though the wavelet itself is still fairly broad, the side lobes have significantly, maybe halved in this particular model compared to the original one. And this now would give a much more interpretable data set than that one. And then finally, we see here we have an entire 5-octave range where we both have 3 hertz, 2 octaves on the low end and 1 on the high, and we get a pretty decent wavelet. But again, the problem here is that at target, are we really suddenly going to raise the frequencies from 48 hertz to 96 hertz or something? That's basically not going to happen. So the other thing low frequencies gave us, and really the original driver for broadband, was the rise of acoustic inversion, or inversion in general, AVO inversion. And here the low frequencies are important because they help resolve the inversion, and you get quite a different result. So in this example, we have a wedge model where we have a sand shale with a thinning sand, a decrease in acoustic impedance, as you might expect. And here we've modeled it very simply with a 5 hertz to Nyquist frequency range, and we can see that though we can detect the sands, we wouldn't be entirely certain about the thickness of the sands, because this zone here would be ambiguous as to what it actually is. Is this a thin bed? Is it something else? But if we have 2 hertz, 1.5 octave drop, we suddenly see that we can fully resolve that sand bed as a continuous event. So if you had thicker sands, you might miss them if you have not enough low frequencies. And that was one of the original drivers, apart from the resolution issue for broadband. So the drivers for broadband then would improved resolution with the smaller side lobes. That you achieve, and I will look at this in more detail in a second, we achieve that by having less swell noise because we're going to tow deeper, so we actually automatically improve the data quality. And if you're towing deeper, you improve the weather window, and then with all of that combined, you're going to get improved inversions because you've got lower noise floors and the like. So if we just step back a bit then, how are we going to achieve this broadband seismic? So one of the early strategies done in 2D and actually a little bit in 3D was the over-under streamer. So you literally have one streamer at, let's say, 7 meters and one at 15. And from that, you can do a wave field separation. However, it's incredibly inefficient because you have to have double the number of streamers in the water. And streamers at different depths tow at different feathers, basically, so the alignment basically goes. So basically, it's a non-starter of a solution. Next came slant streamers. So this is where you tow maybe 7 meters at the front, 30 meters or so at the tail end, and each receiver then has a slightly different notch frequency, and if you sum them all together, you sum out the notch, so you have notch diversity. The problem with this one is that the low frequencies come from towing deeper, and the nears are still being towed shallow. So you actually have a lack of low frequencies on the near offset data, which is problematic for AVO inversion. Next, we have deep tow. So this is when the streamer is towed at a constant depth, typically quite deep, and we'll go into that design in a second. But you have stable low frequencies. The near offsets are towed at the same depths as the far offset. And the ability, at least in 1C deghosting, is the noise floor to recover the ghost, and I'll explain that in a minute. Next, we had like dual component with velocity sensors, geophones. But here we're limited by the geophone noise floor. Essentially, the problem is the streamer is in constant motion, and if you've got a motion sensor, a lot of your noise is going to be coming from the streamer motion rather from the reflections from the subsurface. And then finally, we have, go back one. Yeah, finally we have multi-component with accelerometers, where you record not only the pressure component, but X, Y, and Z. And then the noise is removed by a very high density single sensor network, and that allows the deepest tows. And that's proving particularly effective in areas of exploration like Namibia and other areas. Let's have a little bit more about what enabled broadband. So deeper tows, as I've already said, have better lows, and we can see an example of this here. You're looking at a log frequency amplitude spectrum here, so it's 1 hertz, 10 hertz, 100 hertz. And then we have the amplitude dB, in dB coming down here. So this is an 8 meter tow, 15 meter tow, 20 and 25. And as you can see, as you tow the streamer deeper, you have better and better low frequency response. I mean, it does sort of peter out a bit as you get deeper, but anything deeper is always going to be better. So the next thing is that the generation of these streamers, let's say that came out in the 2000s, were very, very quiet. That means they were less affected by swell noise. They had solid constructions. They didn't have oil sloshing around in them like the older streamers. So that made them quiet. Then also modern seismic recorders went from 16-bit to 24-bit, which gave them a big dynamic range, which means they can faithfully record even the weakest signals. And then finally was a step through sort of looking at tow design in a different way and trying to take all of these things into account when we're looking at broadband from, in this case, pressure only from the hydrophones, sometimes called 1C deghosting. So the ability to deghost with single components is essentially related to the signal to noise, because as these notches cut into the noise floor, you're not going to be able to recover the ghost by inverting for the ghost notch. So in this design, basically spearheaded by my old boss, Phil Fontana, we use the fact that the source has constructive interference, and we can balance that with the streamer's destructive interference. And that's highlighted in those circles here. So the black source has a strong constructive interference at these 2 points, when the streamer has some sort of destructive interference. And we can see that relates to a traditional design where you would try and avoid having these at all in this zone. You would only have the streamer notches beyond this, like here. But in this case, we're actually going to put the streamer notch in there. And the reason we're going to do that is because we feel we can recover that, and we can recover that certainly for the high frequencies, as long as the first notch is above the dominant frequency of your particular area. And it turns out the optimum ratio is about 2.62 deeper than the source, or thereabouts. Different clients have now developed sort of different numbers slightly, and of course it depends on other factors. Most notably the source, the physics of the source. So airgun sources can only be towed in a sort of reasonable range, maybe 5 to 8 meters, something like that. So given that the airguns perform best in those depths, then we can, that will limit how deep the streamers can be. The other solution is to record either dual component or multi-component, and these methods are based on the fact that the ghost response from the pressure is out of phase or opposite polarity with the particle motion, which is represented very simply by the blue line here. So if we sum the pressure measurement and the velocity measurement, we can remove the ghost effect, and in fact we can even achieve wave field separation, so we know which part of the wave field is going up versus the bit that's going down. But as I've already said, the streamer is in constant motion, which would limit how much you can recover from the data. So the Shearwater, the best solution out there was the isometric system, which relies on point receiver and single sensors. So this outputs the pressure and the acceleration in Y and Z, and it uses the fact that it has X, Y, and Z to rotate to true Z and true Y. But really, I want to show this as to the amount of effort required. So we have MEMS sensors every 62.5 centimeters, recording 3 components, and hydrophones every 3 meters or so. So we need the MEMS here at this tight interval in order to be able to remove the noise, motion noise, and the hydrophones at this spacing to remove the swell noise. So if we look at this, with a typical 12 streamers 8 kilometers long, we'd have maybe 61,000 hydrophones, just over 450,000 acceleration measurements, 500,000 traces going down the streamer, recorded every shot, and that needs to be processed. And if we compare that with a conventional streamer of 12.5 meter groups, we have 0.008 million traces, or a 60th of the data volume. So this is what it takes to record the noise so that we can remove it in the most efficient manner. And this is an example of a shot record, pressure data, acceleration in the vertical and in the cross-line direction. And this is after the online real-time noise removal. And this noise removal, importantly, is done in signal safe mode, so no primaries can be affected. And this residual noise then is within the signal cone and would be removed by processing later on. But this is what the recording system itself outputs. So, and because it does it in this particular way, it records, and we can use lower frequencies than other systems. So with lower frequencies means we can tow deeper, we can get better data, and again, we increase the weather window. And that's something that's been used, and we're going to look at looking more in large-scale explorations like you might see in Namibia or even southern Brazil. as new areas are being opened up for exploration. So this is what it might look like in the stack. So here we have the pressure data. We can clearly see the opposite polarity on the velocity data, and when you combine them and do wave field separation, we end up with a nice sharp image from our fuzzy ghost image. So broadband, very simply, slant stream has kind of mostly gone by the wayside, has been simplified to a simple ratio. You think of the source, you make sure that the source times to get 2.62 gives you the streamer depth, and then you just make sure that that streamer depth ghost notch is just outside of your dominant frequency of your data. I mean, it's not strictly necessary, but it's a safe way to do it. Or, of course, you use dual or multi-sensor streamers. So the next big change, I'll call the efficiency wars, because this was a race to build the biggest vessels, basically. And it wasn't always about efficiency. Sometimes it was about quality. And this is really how multi-sources, or rather deep blending, becomes important. So sorry, there's a lot on this slide, but so for 3D seismic imaging, we need a certain spatial sampling, i.e. a bin size, for the imaging to work, and we don't have alias data. The inline in streamer is very simple. It's basically the trace spacing. But even with 12.5 meter trace spacing is about noise suppression more than the inline bin size. Quite often we do a trace drop when we're processing, and we might go from 6.25 bins to 12.5 meter bins, for example. In the cross line, the bin size is a function of the number of sources and streamers. So if we become more efficient, i.e. tow more in the water, we either need to add more streamers or more sources. As I've already alluded to, in the 90s, early 90s, bespoke seismic vessels were being built, and they just got larger and larger. Their capacity increases in terms of the number of streamers, and the streamers became longer as well. But really, the more streamers and longer streamers wasn't really the most efficient way to do it. More sources was actually a better way. And the limiting factor if you use more than 2 sources is fold. So we need fold for sampling. Not so much, actually not really for shot domain, but certainly for the CMP domain and common offset domains, because these are important as for noise reduction before you start getting into the imaging part of the processing sequence. And of course, there's still the old signal to noise, which are important. So if we look at the effect of this, we can see in the sort of mid-2015, mid-teens, 2010s, whatever, we had something typical would be a 12 by 100 dual source survey, and we would record 600 meters per cell line swath. We could go to an awful lot of effort and put 18 streamers in the water, record 900 meters per pass. But because it's still dual source and the separation is the same, we still have our 25 meter crossline bend. The other solution would be to use triple source. We can then go to 12 by 150 and we can record 900 meters per pass. So that's a significantly less equipment in the water, which of course is better. So if you're going to shoot, if you're going to do multi-source, you need to understand deep blending, and that was really quite a step change again after broadband in seismic acquisition. So if you can remove overlapping shot data, i.e. you shoot more often than the natural end of the record, you can maintain the fold, the inline fold, which is important. Land data had already been doing this by the time Marine started doing it at least 10 years, maybe 15 years beforehand. But land data can take advantage of the fact that the source and receiver are decoupled. You can have the second source X many kilometers away from your other source, and therefore you can separate in not only in time, you can separate in offset and even azimuth. So you've got a lot of choices. With the streamer survey, unfortunately, the sources are basically in the same place. So the data looks very, very similar. And we can see an example of this here. So here we have our shot N, the current shot, which is this here. We have The direct wave from the next shot is already coming in. The direct wave is a linear event through the water column, so it's very easy to get rid of. We have the multiple here from the first shot, and then at the bottom here we have the overlapping shot plus 1, n plus 1. And if we go back to the beginning, we even have the previous shot multiple coming in here. And the idea then is to separate all of these out into separate shots. It's an incredibly CPU-intensive process, but the efficiency it gains on the acquisition make it worth it. And we can see here that these have become incredibly good, as you can see here between the separated out and the difference. And the difference, of course, is actually the next shot. We can see another example. This is looking at how subtle this has become. So here we have the probably a multiple from the previous shot. Here's the primary from the current shot. And we can see that this has been separated out. And I don't know, hopefully you can just see how fine the residual multiple is that's been separated out from these very strong primaries. It's quite extraordinary. And the reason we need to do this is because when we run demultiple, we don't want to attenuate that as noise, because then processes like SRME or other multiple model-based solutions would actually put artifacts in if you start to disrupt the multiple. So in this case, the multiple is effectively primary signal. And you only want to deal with that once you're at that stage of demultiple. The other thing I'd like to point out, because you've got two signals effectively, but you've only got one noise, the noise basically is split, depending on the algorithm, between two shots or assigned to one shot or the other, which means that these are actually quite powerful denoising systems as well, deblenders. And I know at least one client who runs the deblending, not because they really have blended data, it's just that they think it's a really clever way of doing some basic denoise. And you can see that here, that noise there is a little bit on that gather, and then on the difference is the rest of that noise. And this sort of near offset noise has nearly all been moved onto that one. So the importance here of the shot interference is relative to the water bottom time. So because there's no reflections until you get to the water bottom, we can ignore the fact of we can ignore the water depth in this. So your shot point interval, if you convert that to time, plus the water bottom, is the interference time. And you want that interference time to be below your primary targets if possible. Not all clients think that's necessary, but most do. And certainly it's the most conservative approach to take, and probably the right one in most cases. Obviously, what some clients do is they might run tests, reduce the shot point interval, get interference, try and do some deblending, and see whether they can still recover their primary targets. But in most cases, we don't bother. We just we don't need to. So therefore, we'll just have a long enough shot point interval that it sits below your primary target. So yeah, so basically what I was saying. So just to give you an idea of these spreads, so this is about the largest spread one can do in the seismic industry. There's only a few vessels capable of towing such a spread. That's 12 by 150. As I said, records 900 meters per pass with 10-kilometer offsets. And that's what it looks like sitting over Lagos. So you can see it's quite a substantial thing that's been towed by one little boat. And of course, it's enabled by triple source. But it's not always about the efficiency. This is an example of a dual source survey, which was shot as a test on top of a pentasource survey. So here we have 25-meter crossline bins, and on this one we have 6¼ bins. And we can see by having very high crossline resolution, we massively improve the fault resolution. I can just flick between those two there. Maybe not. And then we can see here a time slice. This is a mass transport system on the right here. And this is the same one with the high resolution pentasource data. And again, we can see how much sharper the image is. Because essentially there's 4 times as many cells, bins in this vertical direction compared to the legacy or the standard acquisition. So finally, the long and the low. So I'm going to talk a little bit about harmony. which is what I see is really important going forward, and how I see these things really not as low frequency sources, but really low frequency rich broadband sources. And the importance of that will become, hopefully you'll see soon. But why long? Well, there's the rise of FWI. FWI gives by far the best velocity model. It takes virtually has no pre-requirements as to, or assumptions needed. It will just basically resolve the velocity field just from the data itself, which makes it very, very powerful. And the accuracy of the velocity model is very, very high. But why do we need long offsets? Well, diving waves or turning waves take an awful lot of time to go down and come back up again. So if we take an example here, the light blue is reflection data to 30 degrees. So we might see that for 3 kilometers and 30 degrees, we might want 3-ish kilometers offset to record that. But the diving wave equivalent is in the sort of 8 to 10 kilometer range. So significantly more than what's required for the reflection. Typically, as a rule of thumb, 3 to 4 times the your depth of penetration you need for the inline offset or the offset. So a really powerful illustration of what difference this can make is the Gulf of Mexico. And here you're looking at a velocity model using wide azimuth data, many years of trying to perfect the depth imaging, super careful picking of top salt body mapping, all sorts of ways to improve it. And this was the state of the art, basically, using wide azimuth data. And then the concept came along of using sparse nodes to record very low frequencies. So these are nodes that sit on the ocean bottom, typically one kilometer or so apart. And of course, the ocean bottom nodes, they naturally record very low frequencies. And you can record super long offsets with these. In this case, I think they used up to 25 kilometers. And you have a massive step change in the imaging quality by combining the sparse nodes with the wide azimuth data. Unfortunately, I used to have the slide that had just the wide azimuth data, but unfortunately I lost it. So this low frequencies here come from the node, but the positioning of all of this, just with the wide azimuth data, is about the same. So the importance of this is like a whole bunch of new plays have become open for interpretation, especially this is the mother salt here, and these are feeders going up to these salt bodies, and these feeders here now provide a whole new trap system. So this has sparked a huge interest in interpretation and in the Gulf of Mexico, and will also affect other places in the future. So this is a pretty extreme version of that. So here we have just an illustration of what low frequencies can do. This is a PRM system. As we saw in this one, just to be clear, the low frequencies in the Gulf of Mexico, here we're just with a relatively ordinary source. But the improvements seen with having low frequencies was not lost on the likes of ourselves, but also multi-client companies like TGS and WG. And that sparked a whole new drive for low frequency rich sources. And this is sort of why. So this is a large conventional source. We've got a little bit of diving wave there, but it becomes quite weak. And this is the equivalent with a low frequency source. And we can see quite clearly that it's the diving waves are far more apparent and stronger with a low frequency source. But I think that's a rather limited way of looking at these sources, especially the harmony source. Ooh, maybe my battery's going. Yeah, on. There we go. So these are the results from an area, a test line we shot in the Kerala-Konkan Basin, which is a basalt-affected basin off the west coast of India. What you're looking at here is obviously the water bottom. You're looking at a basalt sequence, and then this is sub-basalt. And this is a conventional source, a very large 5,500 cubic inch 2D source. And this is the harmony source. So whether you think one is better than the other. I happen to think the harmony is slightly better, but that's really not the point I'm making, is that everything else is very, very similar indeed. I.e. the quality you're getting from this source is actually a full broadband source. You're getting all the high frequencies in the shallow as well, maybe with some extra low frequencies. And this is streamer data, not node data. So the takeaway from that is that, sorry, going a bit fast, is that, and the importance for me here is that harmony is basically, or these sources run on a single subarray, whereas the legacy source here was 4 subarrays. So a vessel can tow typically 2 of these, but could tow 6 of the low frequency source, which is going to open up the next generation of high source count streamer surveys. But let's have a little bit more about the subtleties of the FWI penetration with offset. So here we have a section from Brazil. This is the Pelotas area that I think we're currently acquiring. And from this, we can take create a simple initial model. This can be very, very smooth. You might want to put water bottom velocity in, the water bottom itself, and then you can have a simple gradient here. Then the next thing you can do is to add a checkerboard. So you artificially add plus or minus velocity differences, which is a bit hard to see in this display, but if we go to the next one, we see here the delta velocities, so reds being higher and blues being lower velocities. And we can see here that we've basically created these, basically a checkerboard. And if you can resolve the checkerboard with your FWI, you can basically resolve anything, because these are vertical and horizontal. There's nothing else that you need to know. So typically what we can do then is take that model and start to look at the offsets required. So if we go here 3 to 6 kilometers, essentially there's no real diving waves, so there's really no velocity model building going on really. So the diving wave penetration depth is basically very, very low indeed. If we go to 8 kilometers, we can start to see those delta velocities coming through. We get probably good results to 3 kilometers, maybe a bit more, and we can model then that the diving wave penetration depth as a maximum is 4 kilometers. But if we start going slightly longer, like 10 kilometers, we can see that we get really good velocity models 4 kilometers down, and even below that, which shows you the value of just a subtle change in offsets can give you quite a big difference in the results. And the better this, the more data and more of the velocity model you can build with FWI, the better your imaging is going to be. And that has impacts, obviously, not only how clear you can see things, but also on things like the volumetrics and more subtle interpretation effects. So basically, you're going to work out have a much better idea of your potential reserves from having a better velocity field. And also, the size, even the closures and all of that will become more clear the better your velocity field is. So in this slide, it was a bit subtle actually, but generally we just use the diving waves. And in this exercise, we also included the reflection data as well. And basically, I'm flicking between the two, and essentially the reflection data makes has very little impact on the quality of the velocity model you create. So you do need diving waves to run FWI for the velocity model building, at least. There's no way around that, I don't think. As a cautionary tale, I have this slide. Maybe. No, too soon. So here we have, this is actually modeling the basalt in India we did. This was the acquisition we were doing, 12-kilometer offsets. You can see we're able to get diving waves from the top of the basalt, which is this orange layer here. And in this case, we modeled what would happen if there was a large velocity inversion, which is probably the case. Well, we know it's the case, actually, because they've drilled through it. But the size and magnitude of that inversion is extremely variable over it. So really the client here was trying to just understand what they would need to do. So you might not just, that's not something you're going to have somewhere like here, But you might also, if in other areas, you might want to think about modeling really quite long offsets through these methods and ray tracing to see where you could be. In this case, our solution was a dual vessel operation where we could double the offsets and therefore capture the diving waves up to 16 kilometers with an extra source boat in front of the streamer boat. So we're nearly at the end, you're happy to know. So all of these sort of broadband blended sources so really exploded a whole bunch of new acquisition techniques from when I started, which is essentially a number of streamers, dual source, not much else. And then suddenly we started to think about other things. So wide toe sources, which is for the near offset distribution, which can help in, especially in shallow water demultiple. Wide spreads, as we've already seen, for efficiency, multi-source for cross-line resolution, and if you combine them, you end up with like your triple source ideas. We can have FWI long offsets for those, either all streamers or some streamers longer, basically for velocity model building. Zero offsets have been done. These are important for velocity model building, especially in shallow areas, where shallow water bottoms. And as we've just seen, you could have dual vessel long offsets as another solution. Again, velocity model building is your main task there. Streamer node hybrids, where we combine both streamer and node data. And again, this would be velocity model building, but also infill around obstructions, rigs, shallows and stuff where a streamer vessel can't get in. And then sparse nodes, as we saw with the Gulf of Mexico example, can be combined. As long as you have a wide azimuth data set or something of high quality, you can then use the sparse nodes to help build a velocity model to help image that data better. So, conclusions. So for modern survey design, we can kind of ignore toe depths to an extent, still think about FDOM or consider the type of streamer very carefully, multi-component streamer. We have a huge range of flexibility now and efficiencies that we can gain with multi-sources and deep blending, but with the cautionary tale that generally we keep the overlap zone below the primary target. We understand the effects of offsets through ray tracing or other modeling. Long streamers are expensive in the sense that it increases turn times and things like that. But not as much as for nodes. It's a small increase for streamers, a lot more for node data. And I can see a future where sources like low frequency sources, because they run on a single subarray, we can start to do large sources and have more than 3 in the water basically. So we'll have the lows because of the design of the source. More sources will improve the cross-line resolution. So we don't necessarily have to have triple source in 150, we could have quad source, pentasource, and so on. Just to touch briefly on nodes, because it's much more difficult, more expensive to achieve long offsets. Sort of concepts you have these days for that. If you have generally they're for development surveys or 4D repeats. So you might have a dense OBN patch around in your reservoir area. You might have a less dense area around that for brownfield exploration. And then you might have a halo nodes, which are sparse in order to generate the velocity model. The interesting thing, though, with this is the next stage of FWI, where we're going to have ever more accurate FWIs, mesh-based FWIs, which adapt to complex water bottoms and complex geologies. We'll have elastic FWI, where the shear wave is also computed along with the compressional wave, the P wave, as well as the density to produce more accurate velocity models. And what I expect to see is a further use of these efficiencies to reduce the acquisition effort and place more of the effort, more of the desired result then will come from these high-end and next generations FWI. I'm not going to show anything on that simply because They are only just now coming to the front. They're only just now being commercialized. But I think it's interesting in how that quality of data that comes from that, these very high resolution FWI models, how that will feed back into the acquisition. And for somebody like me, is how to test those acquisitions. How am I going to generate the data that I can then use to see the effect of the acquisition on the final image? Luckily, it's always easier to decimate data than to acquire extra data. But I do look forward to that over the next year or two as those things become as they become fully commercial. So with that, thank you very much. Thank you.
So you can have your seat. Yeah, thank you very much for the insightful presentation. And I'm sure we've taken notes. And I believe those who have deep water assets would have picked one or two things from this presentation. Thank you very much. I believe our chairman will come very soon to summarize what we've heard. Before I call on our chairman, I would like to recognize some of our fellows who are here with us, who joined in the course of the presentation. We have Mr. Kanu Efnape. Thank you for joining. And online, we have Dr. Emmanuel Enu Efnape, Aret Adams Awadi, and also a past president of our great association. Thank you very much for joining us, sir. Dr. Muyiwa Olawoki, also FNAPE, also online. Thank you for joining. We have Dr. Abimbola Duropiton, FNAPE. Thanks for joining us online. And all our ESCO members that are physically here and online, we welcome you all. Thank you very much for joining. I'll call our chairman at this point, so please come to do a recap of the presentation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Good day again. It's a tough act to follow. Having given us a very technically deep presentation, we say thank you very much for that. Very well delivered. He led us through history, some history of acquisition techniques, especially marine, talking about various approaches we have used over the years. He talked about broadband acquisition. Talked about signal modeling, the attempts at doing over-under acquisition surveys, playing with the depths of streamers to try to figure out where the notches are and try to remove such noises. He also covered the use of dual components and multi-components in various acquisitions. And then he talked about one bit that I really liked, the denoising tricks using the blending. And then he went on to try to explain why there was the need for the so-called long and low, especially when it comes to full wave inversion processing. And the emphasis on getting low frequencies in wide azimuth data examples, with very clear example from the Gulf of Mexico. He also emphasized using bigger sources as a way of reducing the frequencies from the sources. And then the importance of diving waves modeling in running full wave inversions. He also had a good spread of various marine acquisition options in an attempt to achieve two things. One set was for efficiency, i.e. speed of acquisition. The other one was for data quality improvement. and that the flexibility brought about by the fact that you can have multiple sources will be such that you can also gain longer offsets, because say, for example, you have one boat ahead of the other, you have very long offsets. If you have the sides, then you can also widen the azimuths and so on. And he touched very briefly on nodes. So I think, and then of course ventured into talking about what it expects the future will be like in the drive for low lows, low frequencies and over the azimuths. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. So we are going into the panel discussions now. And to join us on the stage are two people, Mr. Peter Macaulay. Sir Macaulay is the MD CEO of Harvest Geosolution, an exploration and production services company. Peter is a geoscientist with over 20 years experience in seismic data operations, acquisition and processing. Is involved in high network international oil and gas business development projects. Peter schooled in Obafemi Awolowo University, and he started his career with CGG and has since worked in Paradigm Geophysical, Icon Science, Icon Geophysicist, and brief data processing consultancy stints. He has industry experience using various geophysical software packages and workflow on Unix, Linux, PC-based platform, and he built Harvest Geosolutions Limited into a growing leader in local content, piloted multi-client exploration service business with a robust oil field service base, and is a member of SEG, AAPG, EAGE, PESGB, NMGS, and NAPI. You're welcome, Mr. Peter Macaulay. And the next person to join us is Mike Milton. Mike Milton is the Business Development Manager, Marine Sales, EAME of Shearwater Geoscience. Mike has career spanning 30 years, starting in 1993. He has worked offshore for PGS and Multiwave on their 3D and 4D seismic crew. He then moved to management role within Multiwave in Borgin, Norway, and in 2006, he became head of marine geophysical operations for BG Group based in the UK. Mike progressed with BG Group to become an exploration and development manager in Australia. He has worked in various places and is here today to speak to us on this panel. Thank you very much.
I was just being ready right out act in terms of timing. That was that small conspiracy there. So we hope to be done with this segment, including question and answer, in at most 30 minutes. I'd like to invite my colleague to my immediate left to make some opening comments regarding how some of these we have listened to this morning, or is it afternoon yet? I don't know. Afternoon, okay. How some of these will relate to our own deepwater quest in Nigeria.
Observing all protocols, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, we thought that it would be useful for us to come tell us how Shearwater and ourselves are looking to deploy some of these systems, especially acquiring long offset data and also providing potential clients with very robust results, good quality results with better fidelity for new seismic. And in particular, we are hoping that in the very near future, we will have a seismic boat that have a lot of these specifications in the boat that will be coming to acquire seismic in Nigeria, hopefully starting the latter part of this year, 2025, and extending into 2026. So please look out for some information, either from ourselves or from various news organizations in terms of what we want to do and how we want to deploy them in the Niger Delta very soon. And I think it will help change the game as far as long offset seismic and low frequency data acquisition is concerned. Thank you.
Thanks, and good afternoon to everybody, and thanks for being able to take part in the panel session today. And Ed, thanks a lot for the presentation and for reminding me how much I don't know about geophysics. It's much appreciated. But it was really good to recap on the history of everything, and it's really reminded me about how much we've invested and how much we've continued to grow and develop from an R&D perspective. And it's really about the seismic industry being able to work closely with our clients to understand their needs in the future. And you've seen how we've progressed. And it's important that the industry maintains those close connections with industry, and that there is a partnership for a sustained business so that we can mutually develop the future technologies. You've seen where we've got to today, but the journey hasn't finished. You've seen how we're progressing to longer offsets and to nodes on the seafloor and to improvements in efficiencies that's ultimately about driving down costs, improving data quality and improving efficiency. I think I'll leave it at that if that's okay.
You want to make a few comments before I give it to the option to the floor to ask questions?
Yeah, I'll just make, I'm just want to say I'm super excited. We're bringing a vessel into Nigeria. It's been a long time since a company I've been involved with as a vessel came in as a younger man. 30 years ago, I was offshore here working, fields that have been explored, drilled, developed, and already had their end of life in my lifetime. So it's great to see a new crop and the continuation of that industry going forward in Nigeria, and this new enthusiasm, I think, and new dawn, I think, here as new fields are going to come online, and we're starting to look at more clay types in the deeper water and deeper section, which, as pointed out, will require better low frequencies and better offsets. And years and years of development will aid in this particular endeavor. So thank you.
Okay. Let me take the opportunity to ask the first question before I go to the floor. From one of the pictures you showed, you had a spread that covered a huge chunk of what we know to be Lagos. That seems to suggest to me that this acquisition methodology would indeed benefit from huge acreage sizes. This means that from the marketing point of view, you are not looking at one company necessarily, but you are better off with a combination of companies with assets for efficiency. Any comments on that?
Could you repeat the question?
Okay, I was saying that if the footprints of the spread type suggests a huge scale. If you're now acquiring over blocks, then you are better off with multiple blocks being acquired together rather than small individual blocks.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. It's all about efficiencies in the end. You've seen how big the spread is in the water. Ed showed the map, and you know, let's be real here. It's an enormous spread that's put in the water. If you were to stand on the boat and look out at the back and see where the tailbuoy is, you wouldn't see it. It's over the horizon. And the risk of putting that equipment in the water is huge, and it needs to be managed accordingly. And traversing and turning takes an incredible amount of time. So in order to drive efficiencies, you want larger and larger surveys, and it's that acquiring data over multiple blocks and having the right commercial agreements in place with regulators and IOCs will ultimately drive down the cost of that. And that can either be through a multi-client model or a group shoot model. Either way will work. But you're exactly right. If you can acquire data over a larger area, everybody gains by it.
Okay, this is the opportunity to ask your questions now. Who's going first? Is there a mic on the floor? Yeah. Shoot.
Good day, everybody. I'm Henry from DigiConnect Nigeria Limited. Good day, panelists. Good day, past president, president, and president-elect. So my question, Mr. Edward, is centering on two. I literally have to write it down so that I can state it very well. So it's centering on, the first one is the survey design and equipment. So I wanted to ask, what are the main considerations when designing surveys to minimize the impact of ghost reflections, especially when using low-frequency surveys or long offset arrays? Did you get that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Should I ask the second or?
No, I'll answer that one first.
Okay.
I think that's relatively straightforward these days. I think my main consideration is about de-risking, right? So we don't want to do something that will make life difficult going forward in a worst case scenario. So I'm very keen always to have that first streamer notch deeper than the dominant frequency of your primary target. That puts you in a pretty safe position. Recovering the high frequencies is usually more straightforward in a way than the low frequencies. And you want it as deep as possible because those low frequencies will impact the quality of your data, FWI, but also of imaging, acoustic inversions, et cetera, et cetera. And there you're limited by the relationship of the source, how deep you can tow that, and then the final streamer depth. So for me, that's a key thing, is to keep that FDOM and that first streamer ghost a little bit separated.
Thank you very much understood. So the second question is on the processing techniques. What are the key processing techniques you apply to attenuate or remove ghost reflections after data acquisitions?
That's an excellent question. I mean, there's been quite a development over the years. Since 2015, there was relatively, or even when I was processing data 20 odd years ago, I tried it myself, but it was an incredibly difficult thing to do because the data wasn't suitable. Once the data became suitable with either deep tow or slant tow, the methods of decoasting became ever more sophisticated. And essentially now they use a sparse inversion type method to estimate the ghost. But we don't just estimate the ghost, we kind of separate it out into the long wavelength part of the ghost, and then also high frequency element. I mean, I can show you where you can literally see the surface waves separated out from the larger deviations due to the sort of average depth, if you like. So they've become incredibly sophisticated, and I would say we're probably on our fourth or fifth generation of deghosting algorithms. And yeah, some of the results you can see are quite sophisticated, and I certainly think it would be great to have a processing version of this where you can actually see how this data is then used. Probably not by me, but yeah, no, it's a good question.
In the quest for getting lower frequencies on the short side, certainly you'll be losing high frequencies in terms of resolution. How do you balance that?
That again is a good question, and that's why I think it's interesting. It depends exactly on your source design, but it's not always necessarily given. So essentially the low frequency output of using an airgun source is the largest cluster you have in the water. That determines the low frequency output. All the other elements in the source are about tuning out the effect of the bubble oscillations, which gives the source its sort of ripple in the amplitude spectrum, which is basically undesirable. What I think is changed is the quality of the near fields that we record, which means we can now estimate that bubble effect very well, which means we don't need to have all these tuning elements, smaller gun volumes in there, which allows the main volumes to be ever bigger. And we can recover the high frequencies because we can basically debubble and designature the data. So I think the idea would be that you're not really losing high frequencies anymore, that essentially they're fully recoverable from these low frequency sources. And that's because of the ability to run this very high quality and again, inversion-based designature of the data using near-field hydrophones.
Some risk. If you were to transpose that to land acquisition, not using vibrosize, where you can play around with the frequencies, say using dynamite, how will you then simulate the high frequencies as well as the heavy dynamite size that will give you?
I mean, back in my day, I did do a bit of land survey design, and that is a very, very difficult problem to solve, because as you point out, in land you have a large, several kgs of dynamite. You're going to create great low frequency gate penetration, but you do definitely lose the high frequencies. There were various modifications that I remember Western Geco did to sort of like have a slow burn that could somehow produce the low frequencies while maintaining the highs. Can't remember what they called it now, X or something like that, which had limited success. The other thing I've seen or tried was to have several smaller dynamite charges going off simultaneously. So the combined oomph is the same as one large one, but each individual one is still producing a reasonable high frequency. But it is a much harder problem to solve than the marine case, I have to say, especially if you don't have marine vibrator.
Thanks. Questions? More questions on the floor? Yomi?
Protocols observed. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for an excellent presentation. I've missed listening to this deep technical talks. My question is around the technology. Basically, the streamer technology has remained practically unchanged over several years. I mean, maybe 20 years, thereabout. And I see that although you mentioned the node technology a few times, but your talk, you didn't really focus on that a lot. Do you see a future where we move completely or substantially from streamer to node, especially if we could combine those with a low frequency source and take advantage of being able to process both the upgoing wave field and the downgoing wave field? If you do, when do you see it? And if not, why not?
I'll make a quick start on that, and not any of the technical bits, because there is two bits to this. There is the technical side of it, and there is the commercial side of it. And I'll throw the question back to you a little bit here, is that a long time ago when seismic was starting, it was 2D seismic, and technology took us forward to the concept of 3D seismic, and the question or the challenge we faced at the time was the massive cost increase in going from 2D to 3D. And people would have been asking themselves this question about, do you think there's a future for 3D seismic, and would we ever move from 2D to 3D? I would say the same thing is true from streamer to nodes. At the moment, I can't speak on behalf of everyone, but we would all love to see high, or what do you call it, tightly spaced node data. That's the gold standard of the data. It's very quiet, it's high frequency data that we're after, and it's multi-component as well. It's a lot more expensive than 3D data, and the piece that everyone's asking is, will there be a place where we get to when it's all nodes? And it's all going to be about cost. And that's, when you said there hasn't been much evolution in streamer data, there's been a lot more evolution in node data, and the nodes that are used in order to shrink the size of them, improve the battery length, the battery duration, and the technology that goes inside them, because what that drives is your efficiencies in order to get a node down onto the sea floor quickly, leave it there for a long period of time, and to be able to bring it up efficiently. We're closing that gap between 3D and node data, and I'd actually written on my notes here is like the very same question: will there be a future where we switch from 3D to nodes, 3D streamer to nodes? And I strongly believe that there is, but it's up to the industry to work with the clients and the oil companies and the national oil companies and the regulators in order to create that environment to push R&D forward and improve efficiencies. Ed?
Yeah, absolutely. I would add just one more on the efficiency. The idea of then combining multiple surveys will cut down on the mobilization of these, generally speaking, quite complicated crews with maybe 2 source vessels and a node handling vessel. It's basically more to operate, and therefore if you can cover a larger area, you have a massive improvement in the efficiency and therefore the cost. I think the defining point when that might happen is when we have we get better and better deploying and retrieving nodes. I think the technical aspect of the nodes is more or less resolved now. Now it's about more nodes in the water, lasting longer, but also putting them down faster and retrieving them faster. And then starting to look at novel survey designs, sparser nodes. But I think there's going to be a step between that where we might have these sparse nodes, relatively sparse, and short streamers on the source vessels. And I know that sounds like streamers, but really you're shooting a shot carpet. You have some streamers to get you the near offsets, first kilometer or 2 or whatever, and you combine that then with the node data to give you your final image. And the importance here is that we can reduce the node density and therefore acquire it faster. And we also now have the technical ability, especially with FWI imaging, to combine streamers and node data very, very effectively. It's not always a given that's going to happen, especially in shallower water. Deep water is probably easier, but it's still quite a technical challenge to combine these 2 different data sets into one cohesive image that doesn't cause some sort of problems down the line.
Thank you. Yeah, gentleman over there.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for the deep technical presentation. From your presentation, you were able to show all the advantages of, long offsets. You showed the image good gate, but you did not talk about the challenges of, touring that 10 kilometer. You could image as much as 5 kilometers with high fidelity results, but you did not address the issue of feathering, in touring a 10 kilometer deep, low streamer 10 kilometer. So how do you address the issue of feathering in your vessel? Thank you.
That's a very good question. And I don't think, again, here, sort of one of the other technologies was the idea that we maybe need to worry less about offsets, holes in the long offsets. These offsets are primarily going to be used by FWI, which is a very different way of working than, let's say, imaging criteria, let's say time migration, depth migration, Kirchhoff, or whatever flavor of that. So the long offsets, which are going to be mostly affected by that, you don't essentially have to worry about so much because they're not really going to be part of the imaging solution. They're going to be more part of the velocity model building solution. So essentially clients have, over the years, cared less and less about those far offsets, realizing, especially as the frequencies are very low, the effective bin size becomes quite large. The Fresnel zone, to be more precise, becomes quite large, maybe even hundreds of meters at these sort of 10, 15 hertz sort of that you might get from the very, very long offset data. So I think apart from the usual, monitoring currents and feather matching, which is what we normally would do as well, we can also just live with larger holes, quite frankly. But we won't give up.
I'm going to add to that as well, because let's not forget from an operational perspective, there's steerable streamers now. So if we can see that there is feathering, you can adjust the streamers, the streamer locations with the technology that we hold on the streamers. And you can either use that to match feather, reduce feather, but also increase efficiencies when you're turning as well.
Okay. In general as well, if the feathering is consistent, then it's not so much of a problem. It's when it's erratic that you have a problem. But let's give the opportunity now to our colleagues online to ask some questions. Can we hear them? Or
Yeah.
is it the site?
No, I'm going to read it. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you.
So we have two questions from online. So this is from James Bayode. The first question is, in terms of repeatability for 4D monitors over existing 3Ds and 4Ds, how practicable is this multi-source approach? And then the second one from the same person is it practical also in fields with existing installations like FPSOs, SPMs, etc.?
Two good questions.
Yeah, they're two very excellent questions. So just on the second one, yes, when you have congested fields, you are going to find repeatability extremely challenging, and that's why a lot of clients at that point, especially if they've got such a high value asset, implies reasonable reservoir, reasonable production, and then the idea of 4D nodes becomes more relevant. So clients are definitely shifting that because of those particular things. So in a way, you have such a high value operation, it's worth doing a relatively expensive OBN survey. On the first question, it's a challenge, right? But there are multiple solutions being proposed in the way that you can repeat the original shots and still have an extra third shot in there. And that's been demonstrated in various papers. Myself and Phil Fontana and others have written over the years to cover precisely that problem. It is something you definitely want to model. You want to look at very closely. And the biggest risk there is your overlap energy and how that might affect the noise in the data. And that noise is quite important on how the two data sets can be processed so that you get a decent 4D comparison at the end. So there is a solution.
Yeah, Ed, I think that the discussion, I suppose, is from a node perspective, maybe I should start with repeatability of receivers. If you've got nodes, you can accurately place nodes on the seafloor to a given location, so you reduce that uncertainty in the receiver location. It then switches to the source side of things about repeatability, and you've got a boat in the water that's moving along. How on earth do you make sure that you've got a source that fires off in the same location as it did 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago? So the options here is to either have flexibility to be able to move the boat and move sources around, and that can be done through source steering, which is a technology that's available nowadays. Or the other option is to just have a massive carpet of shots that goes off, and that you pick and choose the shot that goes off that more closely matches the historical survey. I think those are the two options on it. And it's with those 4D node surveys where you have reduced much of the uncertainty in the receiver location. And with those two options of either steerable sources or a carpet of sources, you can reduce the uncertainty in the source side of things.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a second question from Richard Alakuko. He's asking, considering seafloor seismic nodes, how do you mitigate positioning challenges? I think you just said that. Clock drift and coupling issues compared to conventional ocean bottom cable systems, and what are their advantages in long offset and low frequency acquisition for deep water exploration?
Quite a lot of questions there, Ed.
Yeah. What was so coupling?
And I thought the questions were already actually answered by the previous. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So the coupling, yes, there's not much you can do necessarily about the coupling. I mean, when we deploy the nodes and it's hard, we give them a little tap down with the ROV, so we can literally push them in, so we can ensure coupling that way. The positioning accuracy, first we have USBL ultra short baseline positioning of the ROV and hence the node. And then that data is further refined using the first breaks. And then from that, we can also work out the clock drift as well by knowing the time that the node went in and the time that the node came out. So those are actually relatively straightforward. So with that, we can get like positioning within 2 or 3 meters maybe of the node on the seabed. So it's pretty good. Was there a third question from those online?
Yeah, so that's it. So I think we should just give room for one more question.
The lady beside you.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Good afternoon. Standing on the existing protocols, Thank you for this presentation. I would like to ask this question. What is the percentage of the ghost problem? To what percentage has it reduced with this FWI? To what percentage? Relatively to what you had before?
So the ghost problem in itself is more about for streamers anyway. I mean, OBN data, ocean bottom cable has always been inherently broadband because it's nearly always been multi-component, just to be clear. So the question here is, as you go deeper, you get lower frequencies from the streamer, the more reliance you have on the deghosting in order to recover that data. So there's quite a subtle relationship between the quality of low frequencies you can receive and then use for FWI and the depth of the streamer that you need to deghost. Turns out, in a way, we're kind of limited by the physics of an airgun source as to how deep that can go. That limits the ghost notches that we can have in the streamer side. And that does kind of prevent us from going too deep that we can't then recover the ghosts. Or we use multi-component streamers, of course, which solves the problem. So what percentage? It'd be very difficult to say. I've never really computed that simply because it is a system in a sense. We're getting that data from a very specific relationship, and it's deep enough to record those lows.
Okay, we'll have one final question.
One question?
Any taker? Yes, over here at the front, yes. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chairman. Emeka Ezekwel. I work with SLB. So, Chairman, there's a question you raised, but it was answered, but I think I told the line of the reasoning from it. Yeah, but I wouldn't know if it was answered well. When you mentioned the approach, the new technology, in terms of widespreading of the equipment to get better results for efficiency, and also maybe for cost savings or thereabout. I think we are trying to understand, since that is the case, and we have a large acreage, is that something that can be suggested or something that maybe EMP operators can answer? Or is it possible that maybe since when you go spread more, it will reduce costs and efficiency, more efficiency? Is it something that two companies or, those that have acreage? Is it something that maybe you guys have experience of in the past that have been done? Or is that something that can be practiced in Nigeria, where like two companies have close acreage, like can combine and do, so that to save costs for them and it will be more efficient? Have you tried it before, or is this something you are suggesting that can be possible in Nigeria?
I just want to make sure I've understood. Is this similar to the question that you asked earlier on? Because I have been thinking about this myself since I answered it earlier on.
I think, go ahead.
Yeah, I really wanted to add to what I was saying earlier on is, from a seismic perspective, we're a seismic company. We would love to acquire vast amounts of seismic data over large areas. That's what we do as our core business. What's preventing us do that is the size of surveys that our clients want and what the government and regulators are doing. What I can say, as I said before, is the larger the area, the more efficient the survey, the cheaper the seismic is for everybody who wants a piece of that data. The question really is about the clients that operate in a given country and the regulators, and if there is an environment that's created by the regulators that allow the collection of data over a large area, so to speak. And I guess I'm throwing, maybe you could answer some of that as to whether that is present in Nigeria or not, that allows collection of data over multiple blocks and so on.
Let's start from the easy part. On land, it's inherently cheaper to have cooperation amongst operators. And that was practiced very many times with the cooperation of, in most of the land cases, NAPIMS at the time, NOIMS today. because they have common interest in across all the assets, it was easier for NAPIMS, today's new IMS, to call all together to say 2-3 operators operate together. It's cheaper for everybody. Beyond costs, of course, it's cheaper operationally. You avoid mob-demob and all kinds of advantages. Even technical advantages you get because of edge effects. Now, going offshore with the kind of blocks we have now and with the kind of spread I see in this presentation, it will be desirable, no doubt, to have mega-sized surveys. But you may not now have the advantage that you have one NUIMS superintending over all the blocks. But it may now require that whoever needs to acquire any data needs to talk to their neighbors because there's advantage, mutual advantage for all of them. Technically, it is possible. In terms of timing, whether they are planning to do their surveys about the same time, funding permitting as well, it's also an important thing. But by and large, it's always advantageous to have such large size. If it is spec survey, then you go to DPR, or what they call these days, and it's a long time I left that field. You go to NUPRC, who can engineer for you to have such large surveys. Certainly, the bigger the better.
Can I add to the discussion here? I'm going to throw this out there as just I know it's done elsewhere in the world, but when the regulators are looking to bring new investment into the country, they're looking for bidders on their blocks. Is it not in the government's interest to go and pre-fund a massive large survey well ahead of that bid round, pay for that survey, and then when whoever bids on the block is obliged to buy the data, so that everybody gets to see what blocks they're bidding on?
I'd like to invite you to answer that question.
Thanks, Oganedo. You're in a better position to answer the question, actually. But then, yes, it makes a lot of sense, no doubt. If you could have multi-client surveys, if the clients or the operators will agree on parameters and so on and so forth, because sometimes they will have different technical objectives. And that's been done in the past. There are a couple of what I believe are called Niger span seismic data. There were 2D long offset data that were acquired in deep water, I think sometime in 2005 by TGS, the original TGS. And there are advantages. The problem often, in my experience, in trying to get operators to cooperate, collaborate for this kind of surveys is often one, mutual trust. That's one, between operators. Second is at what stage in the operation they are at. Once you've started operation or production, as in SNEPCO, for instance, or most of the deepwater operators, then it becomes increasingly difficult to be able to carpet the entire deepwater area with seismic. So simple answer to the question, yes, it's possible. Second, it's desirable. Third, should we be doing it? Yes. How do we go about doing it? Is getting former DPR to get the operators, deepwater, sit at the table again and have this conversation around ownership of seismic data and collaborating in the overall interest of not just the operators, but of the country as well. Thank you.
Exactly.
And the contractor.
Okay. Okay, so thank you. Thank you so much. It's good to really see so much interest on this topic. So at this point, I want to say thank you to everyone. I'll call on the President-elect now as she pass on the thanks from NAPE to you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your time, and thank you for passing the knowledge across as much as you have done. I'll call our president to please come to present the token we have to our presenters and panelists. You said? Yes. Okay.
Okay.
I have them. Okay. All right. So we'll start with, let's call our presenter just the way they are. Okay, I'm coming. Sorry. So you must go around with it. And now. So to the chairman. Okay.
All right.
To Mr. Macaulay. Thank you. And finally, to Mike. Yeah. So now, all right. Thank you. Thank you very much. We are gradually getting to the end of the program. Please, let's still stay back. So, as you know, Nigerian Association of Petroleum Exploration is NAPE. Our focus is not only on our yearly conference. We organize technical meetings like this. We do trainings and all that from time to time, because we need to gather knowledge from time to time so that our ideas will continue to find oil and gas. In February, to be specific, February 6, 7, 8, 3 days in February, NAPE and AAPG African Region organized a training session, that's training the trainer, which was sponsored, fully sponsored by Slumbije SLB. And we have 3 instructors. It was a full 3 days program, and we have attendees from African countries like Egypt, South Africa, Uganda, Namibia, and also NAPE members here in Nigeria and in diaspora. They joined. It was an online program, and we had over 50 lecturers who joined because the training was for students, young professionals, and lecturers. They were trained on the use of Petrel software. I also was in the program, I was there. It was a full 3 days program. And if those people were to pay for this training, you can imagine how much they would have paid. So I want us to give a round of applause to Slumbije for sponsoring that program. So we want to acknowledge the 3 trainers. 2 of them are here with us today, and I want to call them out so that we can give their plaques to them. Thank you very much, Miss Joy Edika Gabriel. If you are there, please come out. Mr. Babatunde Jacob Adebayo, please get ready for yours. And Dr. Charles Otogile, I learned he's not around, but someone can come to collect for him. Thank you. Thank you very much. I listened to you and I was highly impressed. Babatunde Jacob Adebayo. So can you collect for, do I need to present it? Okay, let me just present it. Thank you very much. So there's one last thing to be done. We have our young professionals, new ESCOs to be inaugurated. I'll call on our president to, do the inauguration. So if you are an ESCO, the new ESCO of YP, can you please come out quickly? Please come out quickly. President, over to you.
Yes, please come on stage. Come on stage. Just step in, but we'll just hold on here as they just stay here. Okay. NAPA is so structured that whatever we do, okay, the young professionals are there to ensure that we prepare the emerging leaders that are going to drive this industry. They're going to take over from us. And each time we look at them, it gives us the hope that we're on the right path. Please, a round of applause to our young YP leaders. But before we do that, let me allow the YP lead to call the names of the each of the executive committee member and then their portfolio, and then we'll now do the formal inauguration. So over to you, Sheon.
All right. Thank you very much, President. Good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. So I'll just go right straight into it, if it could be displayed again, just for confirmation. But at the extreme end, there is Daniel Abe. Daniel is our financial secretary. Olaito is our welfare and programs coordinator, secretary, welfare secretary as well. Abel is our general secretary. And then Bethel is the deputy YP lead, who is also my second in command. Uche Chuko is our provost. And then Abioye is the publicity secretary. And myself, Sheon, I'm the NAPI YP lead.
Thank you very much. I'm sure when you look at them, it gives you a good feeling that we're on the right path. And I also want to acknowledge that you can also notice there's a gender balance, but it could get better. But at least it is a good sign. It's a good sign. We'll keep improving. Now, before I formally inaugurate them, I just wanted to also say that they have actually been firing. I mean, since they got elected, they've been delivering, they've been doing things. As we speak already, they've delivered 2 technical monthly meetings. They did one in February. They also did one for March. I think that was last Saturday. And each time you attend these events, again, you could see a lot of momentum, the attendance, and the creativity that they've also brought into the technical committees, I think, is amazing and commendable. So well done for the progress so far. I also know that outside the technical, because again, you have to balance this. You have to do the technical, but also it's about work-life balance and also impacting the society. Already, as we speak today, they've already delivered one charity event to the society, And on Monday, right? It was yesterday. Yeah, yesterday was Monday. It's true. So I flew into Lagos yesterday, and when we arrived, and I saw we were on the same flight, right? And then we were discussing, and I was, quite excited. I know we've been discussing, but already yesterday as well, we had this, outreach we normally do to the secondary schools. And each time that request comes to us, we ask our YPs to help us to deliver it. And again, yesterday, they efficiently delivered that great program for NAPE. So, and I want to urge you to give them the maximum support. Sheon is one of the bright stars. He's been doing quite a lot, even before he became the YP lead. But before I do this, I know there are also former ESCOs of the YP that are also here in the room. So I also want to take that opportunity to say a big thank you to the immediate past YP lead, Flora Oge Anusebi, who is actually here, for the great job you've done in the last 2 years, I believe. And again, they were all over the places. You were in the north, you were everywhere, trying to also work with the UAP chair to reach out to our young professionals. So I want to say again, on behalf of NAPE, thank you, and big thank you for what you've done for NAPE as a YP lead emeritus. Now, in my capacity as a president of NAPE, I want to speak on your behalf of all the NAPE members and on behalf of the executive committee, on behalf of the advisory council, and also on behalf of the board of trustees. I want to say that at this hour, 1:35 p.m. on the 19th day of March 2025, the YP Young Professional of NAPE Executives is hereby formally inaugurated to continue to deliver what they've been doing quite well. Congratulations. Congratulations. So take a group picture of them.
PS.
Thank you, everyone. So we'll go straight to the next item on the agenda, and that will be announcements. Okay, this is just to show us that we are almost there for kickstarting our conference planning. So this is the masthead. I shared it the last meeting, and I'm sharing it here again. So of course we know that this is going to be the 43rd NAPE Annual International Conference. The theme for this year is revitalizing the Nigerian petroleum exploration and production strategies for energy security and sustainable development. It's planned to take place here in Echo Hotel and Suites from the 9th to 13th of November 2025. So this is our official masthead. We'll be sharing it in the course of the week or next week. Next slide, please. Okay, like I said, plans are on the way to start everything relating to our conference. So here we're showing you the call for registration. So there are different themes, as usual, that we'll be offering in the conference. They are all listed there in the flyer. But the key thing to note is that we have early bird registration currently on that would kickstart as soon as we publish this live. So that will end in September 1st. It's all detailed in the flyer. So you want to plan and take advantage of that early bird registration. We also have, after that, up to, again, after September 1st, leading to the first day of the conference, another set of discounts that will be applied. And then lastly, on site, there will be additional, not discount per se, sorry. For after September 1st, the percentage for registration will increase, and also on site, it will be much higher. So you want to really take advantage of early bird registration. So that's the key information here. So another key information here is that we will be looking at for everyone that is interested to take up opportunities for exhibition, registering for exhibition booths and all of that to showcase your technology. So next slide, please. Again, this is another call for abstracts that will be going out sometime this week or next week. We have abstracts. The first one will be ending in 31st of July. After that, we would likely extend it for the full paper, will then come up on the 30th of September. So you want to take note of these dates and start preparing your abstracts for submission. The next slide. Okay, so we'll be going through upcoming events now. We're planning a 3-day virtual train the trainer session. Again, that will be proudly sponsored by Halliburton. That training is part of our initiative to kind of collaborate between the industry and the academia. So here, we are requesting for, so it's going to be that 3 days virtual training, right? Hands-on training that will be sponsored by Halliburton, and that will come up between the 3rd to the 5th of April. This one is called for volunteers. So we are really looking out for our senior professionals, anybody that wants to give back to the younger folks, to the community. This is an opportunity to pair to teach. So the idea here is the professionals will teach the lecturers, right? So we are calling for instructors that will be interested in this area to register with us and signify their interest in contributing to this Pairing to Teach initiative, again, empowering the academia. Thank you. Next slide. Okay, so we just heard this beautiful session from Shearwater and Harvest Juice Solutions. We are calling or reminding us that this is not the end. It's a series that will continue. Next in line, and so for this technical business meeting, will come from chapters. Benin chapter is scheduled for March 26th. You'll get the details later. UK Europe chapter come up April 9th, 2025. So that's not all. We also have, okay, so standing on this slide, so we're calling for sponsorship for subsequent months. So please signify your interest and collaborate with NAPE to sponsor our technical events, chapters, national or whatever. So we have the details here if you're interested to contact the contact persons out there. Lawrence, a key person to contact if you want to support or nominate sponsorship opportunity. Next slide. Okay. Before I come to this one, it's not on this slide, there is also an opportunity that is coming up, and you'll be seeing the flyer very soon. That's relating to empowering us for how to navigate the industry. So it's going to teach us things around fiscals and majorly fiscals, you know, on how to maneuver the policies and all of that relating to the oil and gas company. It's going to be sponsored by Strait and Brent. So that information is still building up. It's just to let you know that we have something planned that we'll be sharing to the community to register. Yeah. So that's it. There will be NAPE dues that we are still expecting everyone to please pay up so that we can effectively run and get you all of the programs that we've promised you to. So it is key for you to pay up your dues. So these are the details for the payments. Next slide. Let me see if there's any other thing. Another big ticket here is that NAPE is going to be 50 years this year. So it's something that we will be celebrating and celebrating big. Yes, so let's plan. More details will be out when we are closer, you know, to it. Right now, planning has kick-started. Just watch out for this space. Next slide. Okay, but before I close, the YP will be having a meeting, so the young professionals, after the launch, please stay back for that. At this point, I'll call on PE to give her closing remarks.
Thank you, Pierce. So it's now 1:45. Thank you very much, everyone, for making out time to attend the technical meeting today. We have both online and in the hall here, we have over 200 people. So it's a good one, it's a good attendance. Let's clap for ourselves. Thank you very much. To our sponsors, we really appreciate not only that you sponsored the program, you also made the presentation, and a very rich one indeed. Thank you very much. And our chairman, I recall when I called you to tell you that we wanted you to chair this event, first thing you said was that, okay, yes, I will, but I need to check my schedule. I said, even if there was anything on your schedule, please make today free for us, and you actually did that. And you got here even before everybody, you got here 9:30. Thank you very much. It shows how important NAPE is to you. We really appreciate you, sir. To all our past presidents, our fellows of our great association, we thank you, both online and physically. We say thank you for making time to attend. All NAPE ESCOs, NAPE members, and non-members that associate themselves with us, that are always attending our programs, either virtually or physically. We say thank you to you, and we look forward to having you again next month. We have another great presentation, and I believe that you all make time to attend. Please invite other members also to attend the program, because it's always a period to gain knowledge and share knowledge, so that we can all continue to have our ideas to find more oil and gas. Thank you very much. God bless you. Stay back for lunch. Our sponsors also provided the lunch, so please, let's stay back to have it. Thank you. I'm not the one. So, the PS will direct us to the different, we have 2 serving points. So, direct.
Thank you. Okay, so for the lunch, we have 2 serving points. This is for the what? The VIPs. Lawrence. Okay, 2 serving points. On my left here is for the VIPs, and on the far left is every other person. Thank you for coming.
Hey, how you doing?
Fine, sir.
Well done, congratulations.
Thank you.
Good job, eh?
I am.
Yes.
For every feedback, so that I know how to improve.
You will graduate into it. Okay. That's the way it is. Once you start and you continue to do it, it's something that you do repeatedly. So, yeah, I mean, you will, the momentum will increase.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Don't worry, it's always like that. When I started to, I mean, you shake a little bit and then you correct it. You speak to yourself, I should have done this. That's the way it is.
Thank you, sir.
Well done, well done.
Do you get our email? And then, are you on our LinkedIn page, X, and all those other ones? I'm just, because we need to know, because when we send out all these messages and people are not seeing it,
You see,
that's
I
what
see.
I'm Thank you.
How are you?
Good afternoon, sir.
Well done.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Hello.
Ask from the person who did it last, or ask from Lawrence. Lawrence will give you.
Yes, so people can travel.
Well, I think so. Tomorrow is it 12 or 4? It is tomorrow.
Oh my God. Take your seat.